So today we're going to be creating a world map from the very beginning. This is going to be a smaller world map, maybe about 10 or so cities and towns, I'm thinking. I'm going to have a couple islands, sort of areas, maybe a couple different terrain types, nothing too big, nice and simple, nice and fun. And while we're doing that, we're also going to think of some possible lore, a possible campaign that can go here. And that's not necessarily going to be the focus, but we're going to talk about how we can think of that stuff as we create a world map. When cranking open a fresh world map, it can be a little overwhelming, especially if you don't really have too many ideas. So I like to follow the strategy of just making moves, trying things out and continually adding, rather than attempting to perfect every step, because often things only start to look good when you start developing them quite a lot and not during each phase of their construction. A truth we'll see a bunch throughout this video, and it's certainly applied to the island's original designs. Despite looking pretty clunky and straight up bad at first, the additions of rivers, lakes, and bays turn those blobs into some more dynamic landscapes. This is also when we get a suggestion from chat about the possible terrain we could use for this world. As for the kind of environments, I'm thinking more northern stuff, rocky highlands, evergreen forests, and tundra plains, mixing Northern America, Scotland, and Siberia. Ooh. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. And I think something that would be like classic is orienting it in the same way that we think of you know, our world. So we'd have sort of a Siberia more up north, and then maybe the highlands would be sort of a little bit more in the middle, and then the Northern America would be sort of the lowest, maybe the most verdant. But I think something we can do for this is try to actively place those terrains in sort of different, like in a different composition, right? Just not leaning on Earth too much. And I think that's something I always try to, not always try to do, but sometimes try to do when making maps, is taking inspiration from Earth. Obviously super smart, but not necessarily like following the exact same terrain system as Earth. So maybe, you know, we can have the tundra really around this like river system, and the river system is actually more like of an ice river than anything else. And the verdancy is like actually these sort of large green, large sort of waterless plains up here. You know, maybe something like that can be just a little bit more dynamic and different. But I do like that sort of inspiration. Off the back of this, we'd also get a suggestion for our first bit of lore. This land has a proud dwarven Viking culture before it was culturally wiped out by the Cistern Temple 300 years ago. Ooh, because they didn't fit in with the water religion's beliefs, and now the area is the religion's inherited holy land, so the important people of the religion live there. Ooh, okay. Yes, I really like this. I would continue placing assets down, but at this point in the map making process, these were more working as placeholders than anything else, something I figured I'd probably change later, but they were useful earlier on while I was still figuring out what each area could look like. I'd also put down our first city and come up with the origin of the third group. It is a more like mercantile focused group, and they're not necessarily like native to this area. They sort of have come in over hundreds and hundreds of years and sort of established this very prominent and wealthy trade city, and that has in the past created tension with the dwarfs. So when this more imperialistic, more sort of antagonistic, more sort of we want to take over the land and spread our religion kind of group comes in, they're like, oh, okay, well, this other group comparatively has been much better. And then they sort of create an uneasy alliance because of that, especially as they sort of need to move in with their homeland. I think that's an interesting narrative we can have for these three groups that all creates different dynamics. And especially if you're a party choosing to side with a certain group or whatever, they all have reasoning. They all have sort of their own agenda, and they're not necessarily too similar. Each of these three groups would get their own terrain type and architectural style. This sort of partnering to me is really good for simpler maps because it denotes the different groups' locations and to a degree their ideals really effectively. Plus, when different styles are shown together, it can demonstrate assimilation, and when the architectural style isn't in its terrain type, it can show displacement. And having your map express your ideas in a visual format can explain a lot of exposition about your world and your campaign basically instantaneously. seamlessly. And to me, one of the major goals of map making and one of the biggest advantages to creating them is that they give your players information about the story without you actually needing to tell them. When it came to matching some of the lore with the world design, I ended up giving this island and its people a pretty dense defensive sort of feel, which to me felt like it made sense. This is a group that are protecting themselves from religious invaders. And focusing on this island and starting to make progress on it made me feel much better about the map overall, as I knew would be the case. I don't mind this. I think this is kind of working out. And I do like the brown to go with it, but I think maybe, you know, we can have some different colors on this. Rather than just making everything sort of the same, like color, we can mess around with it a bit. You know, maybe this grassy red, this sort of brown red sort of energy, and we can lower the opacency so it blends a little bit more, right? So you can feel that brown influence. But like on this side, it is a little bit more green. It has those pine trees. So yeah, cool. Yeah, I think that has a nice blend. And I think we can kind of do that for most of the map, where there is a general, like, from this side down, like the greenness here maybe bleeds into the iciness, and the iciness maybe bleeds into this sort of brownness, and the brownness sort of comes back to this sort of browny greenness, right? I said I wanted to have 3 or so terrain types, and we have 3 terrain types, but having them sort of connect in a really nice manner, I think is gonna make this place especially good. Wait, I mean, this is definitely a good example of a map that it's like I've kind of just been putting stuff down, and I'm feeling pretty good about it, but I definitely don't feel like I have some like excellent takes on it. But as we've been working on it, it just is sort of coming together, and the more it fleshes out, it's like, hey, who would think if you make a map more, when it looks like this, you don't feel as good about it because it's empty and sort of ramshackled, but when it looks like this, then you kind of have a good sense of what's going on, you fill it out a bit, you feel better about it, and it looks better. Shocking. So definitely a case of the more I fill it out, the better I feel. While discussing some possible lore, I'd made a mistake, which I really liked. The rocky bits would probably make for great mining and stone quarry exports. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think this is also the type of thing where it's like, we don't necessarily have to specify like what is going on as far as like the exports and the imports. Like, I think I do like to think about that stuff, and, you know, but I think going as simply as like, yeah, there's mines, works. Ooh. I mean, total accident, but I don't mind this land bridge. Bit big, but I mean, it could be interesting to put in like a canal here and have someone control the canal. You know, let's go real small. Let's do this like that. I think that's what we're gonna do. I mean, it was like literally an accident. I meant to drag the map and I accidentally added a bunch of land, but having done it, I kind of get down with it. Cool. I mean, that's what I love. It's like you accidentally do something, you literally misclick, and all of a sudden you see a new perception to the map, and it jumps out to you. Keeping the new land bridge, I wanted to fill out the forest, which at the moment was a bit monochromatic and basic. I also wanted to have it appear in a way that would justify why the trees were much larger than anything else on the map, and why it was without any major towns or cities. A trick I like to use to achieve this is adding dead trees to the forest, giving it a bit more of a menacing sensibility. But I would expand on this by adding a variety of colored trees to give it a fey, magically vibe on top. I was really pleased with the result, and I think it captured the energy and the lore I wanted to convey for this area. Moving down, I decided to scrap the small snowy hills in the main area and went with some more classic mountains. And I said at the beginning I wanted to do hills rather than mountains, but I think we can sort of go back on that. What I'm thinking is maybe like a little mountain range here, and then the main city can be in there. And it can be fortified and taken over by the Sistine, whatever they're called, the Templar. And I like to connect mountain ranges over water. Like, I think it is sort of a fun look. I don't know if it's sort of realistic, but I like having rivers sort of expand like that. And we'll make this smaller and smaller, but that can sort of twist to the edge there. Yeah, I'm really liking how this is turning out. I think it's a different dynamic. and it's not too crazy. This by itself still felt a little empty, so I would add in some hills, a collection of brown hills, snow hills, and even some smaller white mountains. The aim of this being so the terrain felt a little bit more full and diverse, rather than just sort of the same and a little bit boring. An effect which I think turned out okay, but not amazingly well, which is fine, not every part of the map needs to be stellar. To remedy this though, I did add a bunch of snow pine trees to fill out this section and breathe more life into it, which I think worked really well. Next, we placed some buildings. Let's start putting down some buildings, and I think maybe we can use the Viking buildings, the snowy Viking buildings for this area. We can on occasion weave in the dwarven huts to indicate maybe where they exist in the past, or where there's still maybe a little bit of collaboration. Because I think this can definitely be some assimilation with some of these places. I don't think they need to be purely taken over. I think there can definitely be, you know, maybe the Sistine Templar came in, gave some of the groups some ultimatums, and some accepted and some did not. I don't think it just has to be like, I definitely don't think this is more like genocide-y thing. I think it's more of them being pushed out. I try to place settlements where people would actually live, so next to rivers, or the base of mountains, on the outskirts of forests, and so on. This leads to natural looking maps, but also gives you a great jumping off point for lore creation. With this, I'd mostly work to finish up the map, adding in a variety of elements, such as adding a bunch of ships, as well as going through and filling out the third island, which I kept pretty simple and made it in the same sort of image as the second island. So I think this is like pretty much done as a map. I don't think we need to go in like too much detail, and I don't think I need to like be too painstaking over it. I think where we're going to be at now is just making little fixes. Like if we see an area that's maybe like a little bit empty, like, oh, okay, this peninsula is like maybe a little bit not on, like just adding a couple things like, you know, filling it out so it goes a little further down, or like, I don't know, this area to me, it's okay, but maybe we can add like some mountains just to extend across a bit. Just like making sure that there's not these like areas on the map where my eyes just like naturally drawn to them and it's like, oh, it's an empty space, and getting to focus on the details and the stuff that's a lot more interesting is what we want to do, and accidentally like undermining ourselves by just having these sort of grim vacant spots can be a little bit unfortunate, and you don't want to necessarily do that to yourself. And with this, we were done. This took about 2 hours to create, and I certainly could keep working on it and adding details and changing some things, and I'm sure I will, as I do with a lot of my maps. And I'm really happy with how it went, especially as we went in with no real ideas and finished with a really solid map that has different terrains, different groups, and a nice basis of lore accompanying all of this as well. And that's the video. Subscribe to the channel for more D&D content creation. If you're interested in using this map or the 2-page write-up of lore that goes with it in your campaign, then all of that is available on the Patreon. Also, check out the Twitch to make this stuff with us live. Thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye!